The Sixers' movement at the NBA trade deadline leaves more questions than answers regarding the future direction of the Sixers organization. We know we've been sold on the cap space plan by Daryl Morey of creating flexibility and having options available, and we finally have a clue what those options may be. Shortly after the deadline concluded, we got a report coming out from Chris Haynes saying the Sixers are expected to pursue Paul George should he be unable to sign an extension with the Clippers. Now, this is the type of big fish that we are hoping hops in the pond and the Sixers have a chance with. And I do want to break this down from a couple of different levels here. I want to talk about this from the legitimacy from Paul George's end, the legitimacy from the Sixers' end, and kind of my overall mindset on the fit and likelihood here. So let's start off with Paul George's end. Taking a look at his stats here, we know who Paul George has been throughout his point of time. This is a multi-time All-Star, guy that's been in the most improved conversation, been in the MVP conversation at times through his career, averaging 20.7 points per game, 1.7 steals, 3.7 assists, 6.3 rebounds, a guy that has shot 38.3% from beyond the three-point arc on 6.7 attempts per game. He has had his ups and downs. He's seen his role change over time, such as right now when he's been a guy that is kind of the co-star to Kawhi Leonard and a seamless fit next to him alongside James Harden in the star-studded Clippers rotation. We've also seen moments where he has been the number one guy. I think people forget how good he truly was back in the early days of the Indiana Pacers when he was going head-to-head with LeBron James on the Miami Heat. Paul George was truly that number one go-to guy for the Pacers, the guy that elevated that franchise. Now, that was pre-leg break and pre just him getting older, plenty of other times that at this point in time, Paul George entering his age 34 season, but still a guy that has been an all-star the past two seasons. He also is a guy that has some of the playoff downfalls at times. I remember the playoff P moments where those things were going around Twitter and some concerns over situations there. Played really poorly with the Thunder in the playoffs during that stretch. But regardless, he is the type of player the Sixers should be looking to get. That he is this true wing in a way that the Sixers have not had, and even with the flexibility this year, he's another level of true caliber wing that they truly have not had from a two-way standpoint. There also were times in Paul George's career where he was a legitimate lockdown defender. It's kind of come and gone during his era in Los Angeles, but I do think it should be noted that he very much made it clear that he wanted to be in Los Angeles. He's a guy that grew up out there, and frankly, it would not shock me if his mindset is that he would be happy taking a pay cut rather than leaving LA. And to look at exactly what his contract is right now, he is in the final year of his deal, making $45.6 million, but he also has a player option for next year for $48.78 million there. Now, we know what has happened in Los Angeles, that they've already given Kawhi Leonard the long-term extension. Kawhi very much the epicenter of everything they're doing there, and frankly, playing at an unbelievable level this year. That the Clippers as a team have looked phenomenal and have made things work since adding James Harden, that you are seeing the way that things are functioning, the way that the responsibility is distributed among each of these stars. Russell Westbrook is obviously taking a backseat coming off the bench, but there is a true trio of Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, and James Harden. But James Harden also made it crystal clear that he went to Los Angeles not only wanting to get out of Philadelphia and join a contender, but he wants a paycheck, that he wants a long-term big contract, and he wants it this year. And I don't think the Clippers would have made the investment to trade for James Harden and give up the draft capital that they did if they weren't at least considering giving him those type of numbers. So say that is the case. Say that we know Kawhi already has inked his deal, has his extension set in stone. There's limited numbers to go around. And Clippers already one of the highest spending teams across the NBA. If they decide that James Harden is more important to this team than Paul George, that could leave a sour taste in Paul George's mouth and could leave him to pursue other options. That is the dream situation for the Sixers. Now, for the Sixers specifically, let's take a look at their cap situation here. So we know that Joel Embiid is on the books for 2 more seasons plus a player option in the following. We know that Paul Reed likely will be on the books. This is dependent on them making it past the first round of the playoffs here, but everyone else will be coming off the contracts. That was a grand part of Daryl Morey's plan, this cap space plan here that he wanted to sell, that they wanted flexibility this offseason. They wanted to ensure that whatever option is on the table, they have at least a chance at getting it. And when clearing this cap space, the bottom line is they got to find 15 guys to suit up next year. Now, some of these guys I'm sure will be back. I'm confident that there will at least be conversation with a guy like DeAnthony Melton about re-signing him, a guy like Buddy Hield. I don't think Daryl Morey would have gone out and traded for him if there wasn't at least some consideration on the intention to re-sign him. So it's not like the books and the players are going to be not remotely the same as next year, but it does give them flexibility. And especially when you're looking at the free agent list, which to dive into that, guys like Klay Thompson, Tobias Harris, James Harden, Pascal Siakam, Gordon Hayward, Kyle Lowry, DeMar DeRozan, Buddy Hield, Mike Conley, D'Angelo Russell, Gary Trent Jr., Markelle Fultz, and Marcus Morris Sr. None of those guys are quite the needle movers that you're hoping would be the case when you create this type of flexibility. Now, I will make the note that creating this flexibility isn't just for free agents, that this does give you some room to attack in the trade market and bring in contracts that you otherwise would not be able to. That is kind of the vision of Daryl Morey, and maybe that is something that could be worked out with Paul George. If maybe the Clippers want their draft picks back in consideration for bringing Paul George in with that player option. Because let's take a real quick thinking about what that roster would look like. Say the Sixers re-sign DeAnthony Melton, Buddy Hield, Nico Batum. There's 3 guys there, and those are all guys that I think are pretty likely to be back, even as we get into these trade discussions. The Sixers cap space right now, we know what Joel Embiid will be making. Tyrese Maxey essentially going to have a blank check attached to his name, and it seems like both sides are on the same page, that this was much more of a timing thing from a CBA and cap space perspective than it had anything to do with a lack of faith. And by the way, it's going to work out in Tyrese's favor because he made an all-star game this year. All those numbers, the baseline of that contract is going to go up pretty significantly. So he ultimately will be winning on the back end by having more money in his pocket, and we will see what the ultimate outlook of all that is. But we do know what Joel Embiid is making. We kind of know what Tyrese Maxey is going to be making. There's a full max spot after that and then change beyond that. So with the change beyond that, you can bring back the DeAnthony Meltons, the Buddy Hields, the Nico Batums. I want no part of Tobias Harris coming back, but I can see a world where Tobias is back on a cheaper contract. But the bottom line is, say they go in, they bring Paul George, and then you're looking at Tyrese Maxey, Joel Embiid, Paul George, Buddy Hield, Nico Batum, DeAnthony Melton. That's a pretty solid top 6 right there. If you want to throw Tobias Harris in that mix, maybe he wants to reduce to a 6-man role. I could swallow that a little bit more than is the case right now. But that's a pretty good just starting 6, starting 5. Then think about the way that the shots are distributed, the way that roster can work, that with the starting lineup, specifically with Buddy Hield, I'm very high on an intent that the Sixers will keep this guy around for multiple years. That for years I've been fighting and wanting Buddy Hield to get to Philadelphia. He's finally here, and I hope it is for more than half a season. I think the gravity that he's going to capitalize off from Joel Embiid is going to be far more impactful than people recognize, that he truly is a top 5 shooter in this league, and he's going to prove that in a Philadelphia 76ers uniform. We know what Tyrese Maxey brings to the table, a guy that is, I think, probably going to settle somewhere in between being capable of being a number 2 option or number 3 option right now, but I think that's probably the best case for what Paul George is at this point in time, too, that we see the highest of the high with Paul George, that when he has it going, he's a borderline top 10 player in the NBA, that when he's playing his best basketball, there's not a lot of guys better than him. But there are lows, that he is a guy that goes through his hot and cold streaks. I was watching the other night, and he shot 0 for 9 in the first half and 0 for 6 from 3 in that game. It was some ugly basketball. That game was against the Pelicans that he played in that game. So it's not like he's perfect all the time. I do like his game, that I think that he does do a decent job of making his impact even when the shots are not falling. And I think that's been a growth in maturity on his end, that he does do a better job of attacking, creating for others. I'm not saying that that's a calling card or something that you can hang your hat on for it, but at least he gives you something. He's not like one of these guys, like, even I'll throw Buddy Hield back in this conversation as a criticism. Like, if Buddy's shot is not falling, what is he really doing out there? Paul George, I don't think, is that type of guy, that he will compete on the defensive end. He will help out on rebounds, play make a little bit. So I do think that elevates him as a player a decent extent. But when I circle back to kind of the likelihood of this actually coming together, I still don't feel great about it, that my percentage of it happening is still far less than 50%, that I think it's more likely than not that Paul George, even if he doesn't get this long-term extension this offseason, likely opts into that player option, stays in Los Angeles, and hope it works out after the year. I think there's very much a world where that is the case, where it happens, but from the Sixers' perspective, you still want news like this breaking out, that you still want rumors and reports and being connected to as many hot names as possible, because Daryl Morey should be doing everything possible to make the Sixers organization look like an appealing place for stars to go. They have done the right things by having a guy like Tyrese Maxey, having an MVP caliber player like Joel Embiid, and having money to toss at guys in the way that it is appealing. But the track record of bringing guys to Philadelphia has not worked to this point. So there's got to be some changes. I don't care if it's tampering. I don't care if you're sending Joel Embiid to recruit, whatever the case may be. But the bottom line is you have to fill out this roster in a championship caliber way. And if it is not done this offseason, I think there's some real concerns about the future of Joel Embiid with this team, the future of Daryl Morey with this team, and it's not that far off from hitting the full reset button if things are not right this summer. So they still have to get through the rest of this season. We will see how much of a fighting chance this team does have, But I do think this is arguably the most important summer of the Joel Embiid era. This might be the last chance to truly retool around him as the primary option on a championship contender. And there's a lot at stake for how that ultimately goes down. So I do pray that Paul George does slide out of the Los Angeles future, that they don't have a clear or an eye-to-eye vision for what his long-term matchup with the team may be. Philadelphia would be an awesome spot for him to land, but a lot of steps until it gets to that point. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, how happy or not happy you would be with Paul George, and what you think the overall chance of that would be. Make sure you're dropping a like on this video. I'm subscribing to the channel. Appreciate all you guys for tuning in right here on Sixers Digest. Let's keep that Digest family growing. I'll be talking to you next time right here. Peace.